Hi, and welcome to another edition of Tech Interviews. So on this week's show, we're going to be taking a look at the world of compliance and automation of compliance and regulatory demands. I'm particularly focused on two areas, I think, this week. One around the financial sector, but also this increasingly interesting area of how do we deal with compliance in an increasingly data-driven world? How do we deal with compliance for people who don't necessarily have easy access to technology and don't necessarily have a significant digital footprint? So it's a really interesting topic, and one we've not kind of touched on before, but something I think makes it a really interesting show. So to help me to discuss that this week, I'm joined by Shubhradeep Nandi. Hi, Shub, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Paul, and hope you're doing great as well.
Yeah, real good, thank you. And well, great to be have you on Tech Interviews. Thanks for taking some time out of what's late for you, recording from where you are today. So, but thanks for taking some time on this evening for us. Well, look, before we get started, before we jump into our topic, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, and what it is you do.
Absolutely. I think thanks, Paul, for giving me this opportunity. And so I started my career as a technologist, right? So I'm primarily a person who loves technology, fascinated by new technologies. So I started as a technologist in financial industry. Really loved the domain. And that's how actually it helped me to also build my first startup in 2011, which was actually a fintech startup. And as new things fascinate me, I dived way back in 2014 into the field of data sciences. So that is like 6 years back, right, when even data science was not such a glamorous topic as we see today. So eventually in the journey, I met my other two co-founders. Initially met Prasanna, who is my first co-founder, right? And during my management classes, and we both dived into applied AI, distributed ledger technologies, fintech, regtech. And then I met my second co-founder, right, who is Venkat, right? So we met during our tenure, during my tenure at one of the organizations. We shared a great rapport synergy. So essentially, about me, right? During my tenure with banks, enterprises, fintechs, I've been very closely working with risk compliance teams, C-level executives, right? So I learned that there is a lot of space for innovation, and what we see here is that compliance, unfortunately, is still seen as a black box, and a lot of regulatory changes take a lot of time to basically get into the system, sometimes not well implemented, sometimes very human intensive, unfortunately leading to a lot of errors, in some cases major flaws, which finally leads to a lot of fines and penalties. So this helped me that to basically think through, right, what are those gaps, and how probably as as having understanding about technology, right, dive deeper into those, ensure that those problems can be solved. And that's where we three got together and we started this amazing company called PiChain, which probably we'll be talking next.
Yeah, indeed we will. Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about kind of PiChain and what you guys are doing a little later. And for people who are familiar with the show, obviously they'll know kind of what we like to do is try and set some kind of context around the industry that you're working and some of the challenges. Now, and I thought it was interesting in your introduction. I mean, two things. I think one for the techies in the audience, they'll love the sound of your background. You know, proper data scientist, so you know, somebody who does proper technical stuff. We like that. And I think, but also that kind of idea, you use a phrase that compliance in a lot of fields is very much a black box, and I think that's an interesting phrase because, yeah, I think we talk a lot on this show, and I talk a lot in my day job around kind of data compliance and data security and regulatory compliance when it comes to data. So not necessarily in the financial services sector in the way that you do, but across kind of general organizations and the way they use their data, and making sure they can keep track of it and understand the contents of it, etc. And I think there is a little bit of it's seen very much as this kind of fine art. So so maybe we can apply some context around that. So when it comes to fintech, and you talked about actually that phrase regtech as well, which is maybe something people aren't familiar with. What's the kind of state of the industry at the moment? What are some of the challenges that you see when it comes to financial services, particularly around this area of regulation and compliance?
Absolutely, Paul. So, Paul, what I'll do is I'll give you some statistics, right? And this statistics would be something which will basically talk more about the problem and why basically we exist. So globally, less than 1% of the illicit transfers are being brought to light, right? And the estimated amount of money laundered per year is roughly US $1 trillion. Now, that's a lot of money which is laundered every year without a trace, because only 1% is brought to light. Number two, if you see, right, the regulatory fines that have been imposed, right, from 2008-9 meltdown till today on banks, financial institutions, has roughly been 450 billion USD. Now, this is whose money? It's your and my money, which is basically lost. Now, specifically in context to India, every 3 months we see the regulatory body in India keeps on fining banks, right? Many of the NBFCs have lost their license. Many of the cooperative banks are actually, the licenses have been cancelled. The depositors have lost their money. Now, why this is happening, right? This is happening primarily because somewhere somebody either didn't understand what the compliances would be, or somebody probably willfully may have may have been a wrongdoer. Very recently, I think today, uh, the news in India says that roughly 30 to 40 easy loan giving apps, right, in India have actually been banned from Google Store. So what has happened over here is that, right, specifically, this set of organizations have actually violated the compliance or the regulations which is set forth by the regulatory body. Now, this would not have happened, right, if there was active participation from their compliance teams, or they have taken advisory from regulatory or advisory organizations or regulatory technology organizations. So this is the gap which prevails today as well. And this is what is still not solved. And that's what we aim to solve.
I mean, it's really interesting actually, those statistics, because while he was talking about those kind of, that massive level of fraud, I guess, so that kind of massive level of, $1 trillion, I think he talks about in terms of money laundering, etc. One of the questions that was when you talked about banks losing licenses and financial institutions losing licenses, one of my questions was going to be, well, what happens to the people who've got, but actually you kind of covered it already, in that people lose those lose that money, have lost that investment in that institution. Because I think sometimes, if I go back to that phrase you used before, that people look at compliance, people look at regulation as this kind of black box. And I think sometimes they look at that because they don't see real impact in terms of, we all hear about fines and etc. We hear about those big fines. Here in the UK, we've heard about big fines to the likes of British Airways for kind of data breach, a failure to kind of follow regulation. But often as an individual, we don't feel that pain. I mean, a flight with an airline, or some kind of interaction with an organization has had a big fine, maybe slightly more expensive next time, but in reality, I don't think we see the impact. But it's a really stark contrast to what you're talking about there, where people have lost potentially sizable investments in those organizations. And I think for like most people, you can't afford just to lose a sizable investment because you've put it in a financial institution that you was hoping or you expected would be you know, acting legally, would be robust and would be around for some time to come. So I think that's a really interesting kind of stark warning of some of the issues that we see when it comes to financial services and regulation. So what are people trying to do at the moment? I mean, you talked about there's not an awful lot of control, there's not an awful lot of investment in people trying to solve these problems, but are you seeing some attempts at the moment to solve these problems, or is it just with the way technology is, traditional technology, is it just too hard to solve?
So what I would answer this question in two parts, right? So every problem is solvable. That's what we believe, right? Now, what are the two things that is needed to solve a problem, right? Number one, it has to be the person who is basically solving the problem need to have the domain understanding, and number two, it is you have to have the skill to basically ensure that with the domain understanding, you understand the problem and you're able to solve it. Now, let's talk about the very specific question that you have asked me, right? Which is pertaining to the fact that uh, what is happening now, right? So unfortunately, what is happening now, or probably been happening, is that we are just doing hot fixes. So this is a terminology which comes from software, where we see that, okay, there is an issue in production, it's very critical, let's somehow fix it and move ahead. So this is basically happening across. So every financial institution, if they do a hot fix sort of thing, what happens next, unfortunately, is that a new problem creeps up. And when a new problem creeps up, you probably have to do one more hot fix. Ideally, the whole problem should be seen in a holistic way, right? Now, let me talk by giving a bit of example and what I'm actually trying to emphasize. So, a AML compliance officer who typically takes care of the frauds, the money laundering, right? So that compliance officer has to deal with 12 IT and non-IT systems. Now, typically, if you see for a single individual case, this individual has to go through 12 systems, get data, which is in multiple different format. Now, harmonize all this data and basically put it together, then analyze this data, post analysis, understand what is the outcome from this data, and then probably help make a decision. Now, imagine this is just about one case, and the person gets probably 300, 500, or let's say more than that number of cases. So, what happens here is that this person was actually recruited to make a noble decision, but what he or she is spending time in is basically harmonizing, gathering, merging this data, and then to basically put it together, put it into the system to basically get the analysis done. Now, over this period of time, when this person is doing or spending 80% of the time in basically this particular set of steps, what happens here is that the patience or the quality, right, what supposedly is supposed to come out, right, actually degrades. Now that's where I think the problem happens, right? So you have to understand that if 80% of your time is going in collection of the data, and basically ensuring the data comes in the right format, right, basically right clues or insights should come out, and then those clues would be utilized for making decision, you are losing a lot of valuable time. And that's what is causing the major problem. What is happening here is, as hot fixes, we are bringing in some systems in between to help this individual, and that is where I'm talking about the 12 IT and non-IT systems. But this is not helping. If this was helping, then we wouldn't have so many fines, so many number of frauds happening, and then so many fines happening, and so many, data leaks, as you were rightly mentioning, or even a fraudulent activity happening across. So that's precisely one of the reasons, and there can be multiple more, but one of the key reasons is this.
Yeah, so I suppose within there, one of the so one of those issues, and I think this is a this is a huge issue when it comes to the kind of the increasingly data-driven worlds that we're living, is the quality of the data is so important. So I suppose kind of that example is a really good one, that somebody's gathering all of this data together, but actually the whole process potentially is broken. So the output, the information that they gain from that data is actually not much good anyway. And as you said, if the data was good, if the process worked, we wouldn't be having all of these fines, we wouldn't be having all of these these businesses closing down because their processes were solid and they were catching kind of fraudulent activity. I just want to ask one other question, actually, just on top of what you've just talked about there in the introduction, and when we were talking before we recorded, we kind of talked about this idea that that you also see an increased issue in situations where people don't have a digital footprint currently, so don't have an existing digital footprint. So is that making this problem more difficult to solve? Is it a different problem when we come across people who don't have access to a digital footprint? And maybe just actually for the listeners, do you want to apply some context to what we mean by digital footprint as well?
No, absolutely. I think when we talk about digital footprint, right, what we are essentially trying to do here is that we are essentially talking about the aspect, right? So this aspect is primarily whether this individual has ever taken a loan from any of the institutions, right? So, I mean, which is basically a institution which is authorized for lending, or probably have invested into any institution, right, which is authorized for doing investment, or maybe whether this individual has actually gone online and used some amount of social media, or basically have showcased any sort of preferences, or any sort of transactions, right, over any of the mediums, be it any financial medium. Or I mean, for me, I would just focus on the financial processes. Basically digital footprint may mean a lot for many different industries, but for us as a financial I mean, into financial service, and as a regulated tech company into financial service, I will just basically curtail this discussion to digital footprint, which comes out when somebody is basically either using an application of any registered or registered institution to avail probably a loan, or borrow from there, or probably is investing or probably depositing in one of the institutions. So that would ideally be my explanation to digital footprint of, in case when you are for anybody in the financial industry.
And that makes a lot of sense, because I think, and you can see why your expertise is obviously the financial services sector. You can see how that problem could be repeated across any kind of industry. That lack of traceability, I suppose. So much of what we're doing in terms of regulatory compliance is is based on us understanding somebody's digital activity. This idea of almost this user behavioral analytics, the idea that, is that user behavior normal? Is that user behavior something we can trust? And if it isn't, we can do something about it. But I think you make a very good point. What do you do when you can't trace enough user behavior to make that decision? And so I guess that leads us nicely on to, I suppose, where PiChain and you guys come in. So let's talk about that. How are you? So I think you've given a good description of the problem. So how are you looking at solving that? What are the technology trends? What are you taking advantage of as a team, as an organization, to try and help solve what you can see, even from the numbers you shared at the beginning, is a massive problem globally. So how can we hope to solve it?
Absolutely, Paul. I think what we are trying to ensure, let me talk about that, and then probably I'll talk a bit on the methodology, how we have identified the problem and how we are solving it. So if we talk about what we are trying to achieve, we are trying to make compliance sustainable. So what does essentially it means is here is that we are increasing the overall compliance confidence score of a financial institution, right? or a fintech or a small finance bank or PA and BFC in our context. What we are also essentially trying to do is we are essentially trying to use the regulatory capital in the most efficient way. Now, every organization in the budget assigns some regulatory capital, but you need to know how to use it efficiently, whether it is growing the number of headcounts or whether it is using smart technology and having the right skilled people to basically monitor, augment, and decide. Finally, what we do here is that we help organizations to reduce their cost of compliance year on year. And for us, when you achieve these three things, basically quarter on quarter, year on year, you are in the path of sustainable compliance. And that's typically what we try to ensure for an organization.
See, now you've said the magic words there of reducing the cost of compliance and making compliance more sustainable. So we're going to have to dig into how we go about doing that without you giving away any trade secrets, obviously.
Absolutely. So I think the most important part, I think, of every business is whether you have talked to a lot of people trying to understand what problem they have. And this is where we roughly did a survey with 300 compliance officers globally. Now, what we understand here is that there were multiple, astonishing facts which came out, right? But we took the three big challenges which they had posed to us. So number one was basically increased regulatory demand. And basically, how can they quickly adopt to regulatory changes? So that was the most important thing which they pointed out. Next thing was there are organized frauds, right? So how to overcome that? Finally, I think the one that I have mentioned, the cost of compliance. Now, when we understood these three facts, we basically understood that this is very much aligned to the experience that we ourselves has got while we were working somewhere. What has been the challenges most of the risk and compliance teams have been facing, the CIOs, CEOs have been facing. So to basically help solve that, right? What we understood here is that we need to have very specialized smart systems, right? So this is where what we have built here is a system which basically has got the flavor of AI, machine learning, natural language processing, right? All imbibed into it, right? Along with a rock solid traceability via blockchain, right? So this product that we have built, right, or the underlying rock hard platform that we have built, right? So that's called DeepPi. So DeepPi augments a compliance officer to provide faster, better, and accurate decisions. So we, as in like the founders, we brought in our deep domain technology, market expertise, and helped build this AI and machine learning based system, which self learns from the experiences. Now, what it does here is that it does rapid knowledge extraction, tacit knowledge capture, and the most important thing is that it provides precision recommendations, right? So we ensure all the three things are put together. And finally, what are the benefits it provides? So three key benefits, right? We provide an augmented human enterprise, right? So what essentially it means here is that every compliance officer, be it young, as in like 3 to 5 years into the system, or be it 15 to 25 years into the system, can actually work at the same skill and capacity. Number two, knowledge cross pollination. So the top performers, who are probably the 5%, and their peers, who are the 95% rest, right? So both of them can share their knowledge, and then with knowledge cross pollination, I mean, the overall knowledge of the organization is elevated. And the third, again, all of these are built with the cutting edge technologies, and this whole system, as I said, is built with cutting edge technologies. as in like the programming, the tech tools that are used are very much cutting edge to ensure that it's futuristic in nature, right? Because we understand the future which is coming would be of newer technologies, and we cannot build something which is a little older in terms of technology, like a Java, C, C++, although those are like very prominent languages which we had when even we were working. But we understand that we need something new, something faster, and that is the kind of technology which has been with which it has been built, just more futuristic in nature.
So this is a way of kind of overcoming the issue we talked about before, where an individual or department in an organization is charged with trying to tie together all of those bits of information to look at the validity of a transaction. And actually what we're doing is we're taking advantage of, you know, the ability to process more rapidly with, you know, leading edge technologies, the ability to pull together far more broad information sources than we could probably do as human beings, and the ability to spot those trends that, again, you know, I mean, and this is kind of proper data science, isn't it? That ability to spot trends that as human beings, again, we would struggle to spot ourselves, because they're just, you know, they're either too vast, or we'd have to look at too much data, and we just don't have the time, because actually the pressures, as you kind of talked about earlier on, the pressures on those individuals to make decisions are of such that, you know, if probably if they were given 50 years to look at every transaction, they'd be able to do it. But of course you can't have 50 years to look at every transaction, because the world can't just stop like that. I mean, interesting. One thing that did kind of go into the back of my mind as you was talking, though, we talked earlier on about people who don't have these kind of digital tracks, these digital footprints. So in this case, where we're looking at more and more data and we're making better decisions based on data, how's that addressing that kind of piece where people maybe have not no digital footprint, I suppose, to be fair to what you're talking about before, but have very limited digital footprints? How does that solve that problem?
Absolutely. I think that is very interesting. Again, this is where, again, AI data science typically helps a lot, right? So whenever you don't have a lot of data about an individual, you make decision on transactional behavior or contextual behavior. So we understand the behavioral aspects, either it is transactional, contextual, usability, and all those trends helps us to make better decisions, right? So I think it's always a little tricky, but I guess with the nice AI data science based methodologies which have come to the forefront, right? I mean, I'll just take a step back and talk about statistics. If you see statistics, statistics takes has got two terms, what is called population and sample, right? So you can never basically work on the population, you have to work on the sample, and the sample has to be such that it represents the population. And if you are able to make that sample well, connect the dots of the behavior and transactions, right, you're able to say whether this sample is part of this population or of a different population. So I think anybody who comes from a data science background might be able to appreciate this, but this is how you probably take trends, understand trends, and then connect the trends with the individual, and then basically help with the minimal data make better decisions.
So even with my very limited data data science knowledge, and when I say limited, I mean none, that actually that makes perfect sense, because you know that you can see exactly how that clears that challenge up, because what we have is this massive data set, and although that individual may not have their own digital footprint, their behavior is probably going to match something that we've got in this massive data set. And I guess the answer to kind of how you're solving that problem is because you can make those decisions so quickly, and because the way you're making those decisions is improving the accuracy of that capability so much, that actually even for somebody who has no digital footprint, let alone a small digital footprint, but has none whatsoever, you would still be able to look at that kind of the transaction that they're currently going through, and you've got this massive data set that says, actually, I've seen 1,000 people who look like this person, and those 1,000 people all did this thing, so the chances this person's going to do the same thing as well. Is that kind of roughly it?
So yes, I mean, of course, I mean, you have touched the right threads, but it is actually a lot more complex than that. So that's why I took a very simple example,
Yeah, I
because
needed simple, Shub. Let's be fair.
yeah, yeah. So I think there can be over a 5,700 types of trends that you basically try to work on, and then you have to basically make your decision roughly around 1,300 to 1,400 trends. So I think that's roughly the complexity of the problem, but I think you have explained it very well, touching the right threads.
Thank you. That's very nice of you. Well, look, Shub, we're kind of coming to the end of our time here, and it's a late on a Friday evening for you, without giving too much away of the secrets of when we're recording. But what I wanted to just kind of wrap up on very briefly, I think this is a really interesting conversation, I'd love to hear stories about practical use of data science. I talk about data a lot with people, and I think that there's a really there's some assumptions that making that we can, there's so many tools available now that everybody can make decisions around data, and I think it's interesting to hear about practical examples of people who are data scientists who are smart with data, building platforms that solve real world problems. So thank you for sharing that. So if people do want to find out more about PiChain, maybe if they want to find out whether your solutions are applicable to them, what's a good way they can go about doing that?
So I think the best thing is our website, which is www.pichainlabs.com. So that's the number one. Number two, we are all, I mean, me, my co-founders, and my team is there in LinkedIn. So you can look for PiChain on LinkedIn and be able to find PiChain, and you can then find all the people. You can find me in LinkedIn. I'm very much active on LinkedIn, and please reach out to me with your messages. Happy to answer them as well. And if there are synergies, happy to work with you.
Well, sure. Well, I think that's been brilliant, and I'll make sure that the website and the link to the LinkedIn site for PiChain it goes in the show notes as well. But Shub, for now, look, that's been a really fascinating conversation, and I think it's a fascinating real world problem that you guys are trying to help to solve. And so, I'll be certainly paying attention to kind of how you develop and how you continue to innovate. And thanks for being on the show, and hopefully we'll get you on again sometime in the future. But Shub, for now, thanks for being a guest on Tech Interviews, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much, Paul. It has been an amazing discussion, and I'm looking forward for more in the future. Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed that. For show notes, pop over to techstringy.com. We'll also find all of our previous Tech Interviews episodes. And if you've got an idea for a show or would like to appear as a guest, then why not email me at podcast@techstringy.com. And if you want to make sure you catch next episode of Tech Interviews, then why not subscribe? You can subscribe in all good homes of podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher and Spotify, and of course right here on YouTube. So until next time, thanks for watching.